Good afternoon. The story I want to share with you today begins with a journey. It's a voyage that begins this month and happens every year here in the Indian Ocean. This journey confronts us with some of the formidable challenges as well as some of the extraordinary opportunities that exist in tropical marine conservation today. This is Zoe. He's heading on a voyage. He's a fisherman on the Indian Ocean island of Madagascar, where I first started working as a marine biologist 15 years ago. His journey will take him almost 1,000 kilometers, sailing north by dugout canoe with his brothers and his cousins. They travel with no lights, no navigation equipment, no sounder, no engine, often sailing many dozens of miles out to sea. This is a remote and starkly beautiful corner of Africa, some of the continent's biggest coral reefs and mangrove forests, home to some of the highest densities and diversities of marine life found anywhere on the planet, second only to the Southeast Asian Coral Triangle. Zoe's destination is here, the aptly named Barren Isles archipelago, tiny sand keys remote in the Mozambique Channel, where Zoe and many hundreds like him will make their home for most of the next year, targeting the few remaining fish stocks that are still abundant in these exceptionally remote waters. Zoe's family are Vezu, traditional nomadic seafaring people from coastal southern Madagascar who depend intimately on the sea. All family members fish every day. In this remote, arid environment, there's really no alternative, and our research shows that seafood here accounts for the sole source of dietary protein in 99% of household meals. This is Melantine. She's from Zoe's neighboring village, but isn't able to make that very long and arduous journey north with the migrants. Like most women, she fishes on foot at low tide, targeting invertebrates like octopus on the reef flat with a spear. When Melantine was a girl, she remembers that it used to take her several hours to walk across this reef because it was so thick with the heads of living coral. Back then, she could catch up to 30 large octopus on a single outing. But she had to be very careful to get out of the water before the incoming tide had reached her waist because of the risk of attracting the attention of overly curious sharks. Today, there are no sharks, and she can walk across that same reef in just a few minutes because there's so little living coral to block her way. And with her sharp eyes scouring that reef for several hours, she's lucky if she'll catch 2 or 3 juvenile octopus. In her lifetime, Melantine has seen the collapse of this once extraordinary, magnificent coral reef ecosystem. Now, the Vezu are not alone. Hundreds of millions of people like Zoe and Melantine are confronted with the very human reality of our planet's tropical marine biodiversity crisis from one day to the next. There is an alternative direction that this narrative can take in line with the Earth Optimism Summit, because there's a breathtakingly simple tool out there for rebuilding fisheries. We know that recovery of marine ecosystems within and around marine reserves can be so effective that if we can scale up protection to around 1/3 of our oceans, we're in with a chance of rebuilding fish stocks worldwide. And yet we're currently protecting less than 1/5 of this target, and evidence suggests that the vast majority of those existing marine reserves are failing, being resented rather than defended by the communities that live around them. Time and again, tropical marine conservation efforts fail to capture that essential local buy-in, and all too often only alienate and disenfranchise the very people who should count on their success. Back in Melantine's village, her community has shown me how we can reimagine this relationship between people and conservation. It just so happens that some species can recover phenomenally quickly with protection, like this tropical octopus that grows at exponential rates. Octopus gleaned on coral reefs here in southern Madagascar are exported all the way to Europe, one species underpinning an entire coastal economy in a place where fishing is the only job on offer. A decade ago, catches here were starting to fall. The outlook wasn't good. Melantine's village decided to set aside a very small area of the reef where they usually catch octopus for just a few months to see what would happen. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're a Malagasy fisherwoman used to landing octopus at about 400, 500 grams, immature. Now imagine how it feels when you pull out a bigger octopus, from the water, around 10 times that size, 4 or 5 kilograms. That's exactly what happened when Mellentine's village reopened its fishery. People saw and people talked. Soon, neighbors were replicating this model, and in a decade, it's gone literally viral, being replicated hundreds of times along one of the longest coastlines in Africa. This model for local fisheries management is growing every year. It's spawned new fishing legislation, it's crossed borders, and it's now being adapted to other fisheries across the Indian Ocean. Crucially, our research shows that this model yields real monetary profits with a monthly internal rate of return of 92%. That's exceeding any investment opportunity on the market. So here in some of the poorest communities on the planet, we're learning that conservation can be one of the highest yielding investment opportunities on Earth. And having seen this, something quite remarkable is happening. These same communities have started raising the bar, creating permanent marine reserves within vast, locally managed conservation areas around critical coral reefs, seagrasses, and mangrove forests. And 10 years on from those first reserves, we're starting to see enduring conservation impacts. Fish biomass, the definitive indicator for marine protected area effectiveness, has started to build relative to areas outside. And these communities are going further still, securing definitive legal access rights for their fisheries, and in doing so, eliminating destructive industrial fishing vessels from their waters. In just a decade, this movement has grown to reach 15% of Madagascar's inshore seabed and reach almost a third of 1 million people. What started as a prototype for local village-level fisheries management has scaled into a national grassroots movement for marine protection and the human rights of fishers to their resources. That's been achieved on a modest budget and very, very little outside help. It's even prompted the country's president to pledge to further triple the total area of ocean that's protected and to establish new legislation to secure local access rights to fisheries. Over the last 15 years, I've had the enormous privilege of helping to build this grassroots movement for marine protection. My organization, Blue Ventures, builds learning networks of community groups to share this profound local experience in fisheries management and help drive further expansion of this movement. We're already working with communities and partners across 9 countries around the Indian Ocean, connecting communities to share these stories and learnings and experiences, but particularly we do this through these barefoot grassroots community exchanges, because we're learning that this movement is inspired not by conversations that are taking place on conference stages or in the pages of scientific journals, but on the beaches and the landing stations that are around our coasts. That's very much where the magic is happening. So Zoe and Mellentine's journeys, their sacrifices, their struggles, they illustrate the inextricable links between people and nature that really set the stage for our work as marine conservationists in the 21st century. Ignoring these links risks perpetuating broken models of marine conservation. Exploring and understanding them, just as the Vezu are doing here in Madagascar, can transform our work as conservationists into a story that's about abundance and not austerity. Because with the right models, we have a hope of scaling up our work and ultimately of engaging the hundreds of millions of people that work in and around fishing to work with us and not against us. Thanks.